Counselors of Reddit. What is the most NSFW thing you've seen happen at camp? Story 1. I was a camp counselor a few years ago at a camp for foster kids. One week, a counselor caught a camper, M15, in bed with another camper, F14. The room they were in was tiny, and the 4 other girls in the bunks were awake and cheering them on. They were loud enough to wake the counselor, who pulled the male camper out of bed. The guy had a Ziploc bag around his E, held in place by a rubber band. I was both impressed at their dedication to trying to have safe and appalled at how terribly they went about it. Story 2. My time to shine. I was witness to one of the most hardcore and insane things that has ever happened at a Christian camp. In the summer of 2001, I was a counselor/work crew member at a Christian camp in northern CA. I was there for a month, and we had 4 different groups that showed up for 1 week each. This first 3 groups were completely normal and without incident. The last week, we had a group of about 300 at-risk kids that were from underprivileged areas up and down the Pacific coast from San Diego to Seattle. These were mostly kids that were growing up on some mean streets and rarely got out into nature, so it was awesome for them to be out in nature and getting the full camper experience. The first day went fine, and it was mostly just everyone settling in. After the second day, however, things started getting a little bit tense between some of the different groups of kids from different areas. On the third day, we had a hoedown with all the campers on the basketball court as a dance floor. This is where tensions came to a head and where got intense very fast. Unknown to our ultimately naive camp leaders, there were multiple Crip and Blood gang members from different cities throughout the groups of campers. The hoedown ended up becoming a battleground. I'll never forget watching a 6+ teenager leap off of the top of some bleachers like Roddy Piper off a turnbuckle and smash an unsuspecting camper's face in. It erupted into a full-blown brawl that lasted the better part of an hour. I honestly consider it a miracle that nobody was killed. I have seen a few street fights in my day, but this one made me never want to see another one. As a result, a few campers went to the hospital, a few got arrested, and the rest went back to their bunks. Later that evening, each counselor was assigned a bunkhouse to bring a tray of brownies and pitcher of juice to. We did this on day 3 for all the camp groups. Basically, we were supposed to befriend them with juice and brownies and tell them how great our Christian organization is and how Jesus has positively affected us. Upon entering the bunkhouse, I see a timid white counselor with his head in his hands, in an almost fetal position sitting on the edge of a bunk. As I look around, I notice all of the campers are rummaging around in their bags and grabbing their gang colors and bandanas. It wasn't really picking up on what was happening until I heard the unmistakable sound of a slide being pulled back on handgun. As I turn around, I see 2 kids tucking in pistols into their waistbands. These kids were suiting up for a full-blown gang war in the middle of a Christian camp. I don't remember what I said exactly, but I must have said something because their group leader guy looked up from his hands with watery eyes and just mouthed, "I don't know what to do." I set down the pitcher of juice and plate of brownies on the ground and booked it to the main building in the camp. I told the camp leaders what was going down, and they called 911 immediately. Luckily, the cops got there relatively fast, given it was fairly close to a small town. They ended up arresting over a dozen campers and even a few of their group's counselors. To this day, I don't know what their counselors were arrested for. They canceled the rest of the camp and sent all the kids home 3 days early. That was the last summer camp I ever was a counselor at. Teal, DR Bloods, and Crips take a trip to Camp Winepasaki. Oh, Story 3. My favorite on was a 13-year-old boy at camp out. Both his hands were in his sleeping bag, and he was clearly masturbating. His counselor called a hand check, where you have to display both hands in the air. He only raised on hand. The counselor asked for both hands, and he replied, "Give me 4 minutes." Story 4. Saw a girl give a guy a hand job under a towel. On the bus. On the bus filled with children. On the bus filled with children going to a Christian camp. Story 5. This summer, I walked in on 5 15, 16-year-olds touching ball sacks together while comparing testicle size. That was a fun incident report to fill out edit. For the record, the incident report doesn't get them in trouble. It's more of a thing to protect me and the other counselors if a kid were to tell their parents. Story 6. I worked as a junior counselor at a summer camp quite some years back that had kids aged 6-15. One camper, let's call him Billy, he was 10, was really homesick. Billy was very shy and awkward, and you could tell something wasn't 100% right with him. Lights out was at 8 p.m., but they could use a lantern to read or tell ghost stories, wise other, as long as they didn't disturb their bunkmates. Now, a few things happened while Billy was at camp. First thing, Billy was being made fun of by this other camper. We'll call him Jake. Jake was the typical, "my dad can beat up your dad" brat. One night, Jake comes to the counselor cabin crying. He said he woke up and someone was peeing on him and peeing in his mouth. He didn't know who though because he had in his eye and couldn't see. After asking around, nobody saw anything, so we documented it, reported it to the parent, and the mom came to get him. One down. Next incident was a few nights later. Another kid, we'll call him Chad, stole Billy's dinner and ripped up one of his Pokemon cards. Not sure if it was Pokemon, but it was a game card of some kind. That night, we hear yells coming from Billy's cabin. We run over and see Chad with a giant cut on his head and a broken vase. Apparently, the vase had fallen off the shelf while Chad was sleeping and hit him. Billy had an eating grin the entire time. Chad needed 8 stitches and apparently had some skull fractures. Not sure how accurate the skull fracture part was. Other counselors talked. 2 down. The last and final thing that happened was about a week after the vase incident. Another kid, we'll call him Derek, was having a rough time at camp. He was also homesick and missed his parents. I figured Derek and Billy would get along great. I was wrong. Long story short, Billy was found in one of the closets, shoving a broomstick handle into Derek's butt, while Derek cried and touched Billy's. They had their parents called and they were both kicked out of camp. I come to find out 15 years later that Billy's father was manipulating and sexually abusing him almost every night, and that's just how he thought you made friends. To this day, I know the tale of Billy lives on as the craziest thing that's ever happened at that camp. Edit. Holy, this blew up. Just a few things to add. I asked around. The camp is still open and the story of Billy's butt broom still lives on. For some reason, people were confused about why there was a vase in their room. It was more like a tall clay pot. The campers did arts and crafts. According to an old friend I know in the local PD, Derek died a few years ago. He's unsure if it was drug-related or an accident. He's trying to find more info. I really hope he got therapy, though. Billy's dad apparently was arrested for rape and sexual abuse when he got his 14-year-old daughter pregnant. Not sure if he's still in jail or where he is. I don't know where Billy is, and no, that's not his real name. Story 7. This actually happened earlier today. I work at a summer day camp at a local park with kids in kindergarten age group. Interesting, gross things happen almost every day with kids at that age. But today's events took the cake. Basically, this 6-year-old boy found a dead in the grass and decided it would be fun to pick it up and smear the blood and guts all over his hands and arms. After doing that, he started chasing around other campers to try to share his entrails on them. I had the pleasure of catching the gore-covered kid, ripping the ravaged carcass out of his hands, and spending half an hour in the bathroom getting him and myself cleaned up. When I asked him why the heck he picked up a dead animal, he said that he thought it was something awesome to do. Edit. Thanks for the gold, kind stranger. Just goes to show that comments about 6-year-olds savaging animals are totally the way to go. Story 8. Finally a chance to post this. One year I was working a regular camp and had a lead counselor run over to another counselor, and I had to say, look in the first stall of the boys' bathroom. We left our kids with our age group's female counselors and ran. By the time we made it, a crowd of counselors had formed around the toilet. Contained inside was by far the mightiest, largest turd I have ever seen in my life, easily a diameter of 3 inches and long enough to be far down into the toilet while also freewheeling out of the surface of the water. No campers were told about this. A few days later, a camper asked me if we were running to the bathroom the other day because of a giant piece of and claimed to be the conjurer of it. I was mortified. Story 9. I was working at a Young Life camp in Colorado probably 12 years ago. I think it was the first day right around dinner time, and a girl just up and died. Her heart just stopped. She was sitting talking with her friends and fell over. It was incredibly intense and very sad for a lot of people, and tons of people were there to witness it. It's not the most scandalous of camp stories, but it was certainly pretty fucked up and put a weird vibe on the rest of the week. Story 10. I was a counselor at a day camp. We took kids to the zoo. A kid shoved his thumb fully inside a petting zoo goat's butt. I asked him why, and he just shrugged, looking at me like I'm the idiot. I felt bad for the goat, but it was still standing next to him, so maybe it was into it. Story 11. We heard rumors about the cabin next to us one week at camp. It was a game called Monkey, and it involved one of the kids getting naked and putting a sock over his. He'd then swing around the room using the bed frames and whatnot, making monkey noises. To this day, I'm not sure what the game was. I'm guessing you won if you didn't get raped. Story 12. Nobody will ever believe this. My parents never did. For some reason, it didn't make national news. But here we go. I went to a summer holiday camp once. Not religious or any other organization hosting it. Just a cheap way for parents to send their kids off for a couple weeks in summer. Well, on the 8-hour bus trip there, I already noticed some kids seemed odd, but didn't think that would be an ongoing theme. I was wrong. It turned out that many institutions housing kids displaying behavioral problems, to use a nice term, were sending kids there too. It started out with the older kids, I 15, regularly bullying and hurting younger kids. I got to be a victim on day 1. Yay. We were housed in little wooden huts with 8 or 10 kids each. Day 2, it started to smell very bad. After telling the camp staff and them searching the hut, it turned out to be a kid. He will appear again, shitting, and in his fucking suitcase. Camp staff threw the suitcase away, told us to take it easy on him and not tell anybody. Of course, we told the whole camp. That probably pushed the kid to completely off the edge. He started running around naked and usually with telling weird lies like, we don't have knives at home because I peeled off all the wallpapers with knives, so my dad made us knives out of Coke cans. At that point, we all knew he didn't have a family already. He lived in some sort of loony bin for kids, and he also started getting violent. At some point later, he attacked me, naked, I crushed him. Other kids said I kicked him until he didn't move anymore. I don't remember kicking him after he went to the ground, but that day even the biggest kids didn't try to with me anymore, so I probably snapped and did kick the out of him. Until now you may think, doesn't sound too crazy to believe. Let's change that. Right next to the campgrounds there was a traveling circus at the time. Clowns, animals, etc. All the usual circus stuff. But this circus was odd. Some kids claimed one of the clowns would hunt camp kids, only wearing his clown makeup. That I can't confirm, never saw that happen. Most likely kids made it up. But one day I returned from the beach, 200 millimeters away or so, and on the way back a kid coming to the beach tells me, "You can't go back to camp. There's apes going wild and police everywhere." Yeah, right. Heard too many bullshit stories already while being there. Well, I reach camp and it looks almost completely empty. A couple police are to be seen. I almost reach my hut. Then a policeman sees me and screams to run into the hut quick. I'm like, WTF? Run into the hut. Kids in there say apes broke out of the circus and are running amok in camp too. We all stick to the single window, and in fact at some point a chimpanzee wielding a glass Coke bottle runs past and smashes windows. Not ours though. Chased by police. We're all super excited. One kid in the hut claims he saw a giant gorilla earlier. Nobody believes him, until we hear shots but still can see the chimpanzee running around. It wasn't a full-grown gorilla, but still, 120 kilo I would guess. They shot him after trapping him in the camp's gym. Nobody else was hurt, just damage to the buildings. There was so much chaos, we actually got to see the body of the gorilla in a giant pool of blood, like 2 to 3 meters worse on the floor. Police and camp staff couldn't control hundreds of kids at the same time. Story was that the animals were badly mistreated in the circus and snapped during one of the shows, running away straight into camp and probably just getting more crazy with all the screaming or running kids. You surely realized by now I wasn't a counselor. But you already read it and it did really happen. I think it's relevant enough. Edit. If somebody actually heard of this story, Germany, Baltic Sea Camp, max 50-80 kilometers from Hansa Park, or even has a newspaper article about it from that region, I would be super psyched. Happened around early mid-90s. Story 13. I had 2 twin brothers that were very handsy with each other. One day, one of them came to me crying because his brother had bit his tongue after he tried kissing him. Story 14. Had 6-year-old campers at a day camp. After swimming, found 2 of them facing each other naked in the locker room. They were standing there, hitting each other's erect penises and making the boing-boing sounds. Story 15. A 13-year-old girl trying to cut herself with a dull razor when she was upset. 2 counselors having on the beach of the man-made lake. I didn't see this personally, but it was well known among the staff. It was at night, but campers were definitely within earshot. A 16-year-old boy making advances on a 10-year-old girl, fully knowing her age. We put a stop to that one real fast. Said 10-year-old girl making advances on a 19-year-old male counselor. After I told her to stop, she turned to me and asked if he and I were fucking. Point blank. The camp doctor, from the local ER, he had 2 daughters at the camp, trying to sleep with several of the very young female counselors and walking into our cabins when he knew full well we would be changing. The owner's son, smoking weed in full view of kids. Edit. A 14-year-old boy tried to me on an obstacle course during the camp carnival. A 5-year-old girl peed the bed next to mine, and we couldn't tell for days because it was so humid that we thought it was the mildew on the damp towels. Poor girl slept in her own for 2 to 3 days. Edit 2. I had a 5-year-old boy who was the sweetest boy in the entire world. However, in my day group, there was a 7-year-old girl that apparently had a crush on him. They soon started dating, and her comments made it clear that she had some experience, aka she wanted him to kiss her. I started having the kids line up by gender groups rather than together and kept them super far apart after that. The camp owner was a sociopath and ran the camp into the ground that summer essentially. She hired people from Turkey to come and teach sports. These people were near Olympic level in Turkey, but as soon as they got there, she forced them to work in the kitchen for 12+ hours a day with almost no break. They were also promised English classes and interaction with kids and other counselors, which they never got, and they weren't paid much either. It was bad. There's more, I'm sure, but I can't remember all of them right now. It was a fucked up summer. Edit 3. Because I'm getting a lot of comments about these. No, I did not have with any counselors that summer, male or female. I had a boyfriend. Had I been single, I still wouldn't have banged, just because he was a self-admitted man. Yes, we tried very hard to get the 10-year-old girl help. It was known that she came from a bad situation, and we all tried to help her as best we could. I said camp doctor, in quotes, because it seemed like he was just playing a creepy role 95% of the time. The reason I separated the little boy and the little girl was that he seemed genuinely freaked out by the idea, and I could have gotten in trouble for letting it happen no matter how cute it was. I also had my first kiss at 5 and was told to wait until I was 21 to do it again by my kindergarten teacher. Yes, everything in this happened in one summer, minus the girl cutting herself, I was 13 then, and a camper at the time, and the girl peeing the bed. That was another summer when I was a JC. I made a mistake in replying to an earlier comment. But yes, everything else minus those two were the same summer. I won't say the name of the camp just in case someone from there recognizes it. Story 16. I was a day camp counselor during the summers in high school. I watched another counselor eat herself out after smoking by the gully. My 16-year-old self couldn't look away. Also, generally, the counselors are fucking like rabbits. Story 17. There were these two kids, which we nicknamed Poo Poo Picasso and Gandhi. Both were in my friend's cabin, which was year 2 campers, so the kids were just out of 3rd grade. So I guess they were around 8 or 9 years old. Anyway, Poo Poo Picasso would smear he inside of his and left it there for a day before my friend noticed the smell. He wrote on the walls of the bathrooms with his on feces. It was disgusting. Now Gandhi didn't want to be at summer camp, despite it being a total blast. He would and complain and ask to call home, which he wasn't allowed to do unless it was a rather serious situation. Fine, we deal with this sometimes, but what we weren't expecting was for him to go on a hunger strike. That's right, a hunger strike. He just would refuse to eat for several meals. He would break and eat a ton of snacks during our afternoon refreshment period when he thought we wouldn't notice. What made Gandhi really special is that he learned how to vomit on command. To do so, he would drink insane amounts of water. Then, when we would ask him to do something he didn't want to do, he would just vomit everywhere. It was nasty, but at the same time, typing this out is making me giggle. Eventually, the two kids got over it, I think. Story 18. I knew this guy at camp. He was maybe 13. He got 2 girls pregnant, man. 2 girls pregnant. Edit. It's a reference from the movie Stealing Harvard. Now stop messaging me, asking what happened to him and the girls. Story 19 didn't witness, but I had 2 lits. Just finished grade 9. Sneak off into the forest late at night, and the girl gave the boy a BJ. The girl confessed to another girl who told me. When she was approached, she denied it. But the boy fully admitted to it. Edit. 1. LIGHT stands for leader in training. It's when a camper isn't old enough to be a counselor, but wants to learn how to become one. Edit. 2. The camp was in Canada. No, I won't say which one because I'm still really close with many staff there, and think of the director as a great friend. Edit. 3. Stop guessing camps at risk of damaging their reputations. If you want to guess your camp, you're welcome to inbox me. Edit. 4. Holy horny teens, Batman. Apparently there's a lot of camps this has happened at. Story 20. There was this Asian kid named Kevin who went to the bathroom to take a yaourt, but there was pee on the toilet seat so he started to cry and then took it on the floor because he really had to go. Story 21. I was a camp counselor years ago, and while I don't recall really seeing anything NSFW with the kids, I can tell you almost everything I saw with the counselors was NSFW. I couldn't walk into a room without seeing people fucking. In tents, on top of the staff washing machines, in the general store. Parents, if you send your kids to camp, just remember, literally the only thing those counselors are thinking about is fucking each other. Story 22. I worked at a sleepaway Girl Scout camp with all female counselors and staff, where a solid 60% were lesbian. There was a strictly enforced no more fucking in the bushes rule, because so many counselors would go at it anywhere they could find. Story 23. Saw a 13-year-old fucking a 12-year-old, and the position they were in. How did they learn that? Edit. And the position was. Considering this is the position I believe is most likely to cause pregnancy and all due to gravity, I have no idea how or why this was the position they chose or how they knew about it. Story 24. I work in a building that hosts a camp for people with autism and other mental handicaps. A guy with something was really attached to his counselor, a girl. He really liked her and asked her out almost every hour of the week. She finally said, "No, I have a boyfriend," or something along those lines. He got really mad and stripped down and freaked out. He peed and pooped all over the floor. When other counselors were trying to calm him down, he ran over to a fire extinguisher box and smashed his head into the glass. He had big chunks of glass in his face and forehead, bleeding everywhere. We were told as building managers to stay clear of the floor he was on. They would clean it all up. It was odd. Another story. When he left the building, we also found a sawed-off shrine. He would in the closet and then mold underwear to it. He must have used a whole can of Febreze on the thing a day because we never knew about it. Couldn't smell anything. Story 25. As a new camp counselor, you should do everything you possibly can to ensure that you get a group of older kids, ages 8 to 12 preferably. Any younger, and you're going to have some interesting experiences. There was one kid I remember named Sam when I had bathroom duty at the swimming pool. Sam was 5 years old and absolutely enamored with his wiener. In fact, Sam couldn't seem to use the bathroom without showing everyone else his miniature little friend. Usually, when all of the campers were changing for the pool, Sam would make it a point to run around and show off his lil buddy. Every time he changed for the pool, the bathroom erupted in shouts and screams of, "Sam, get away from me!" Now, being an adult male camp counselor dealing with this scenario is a very difficult situation. Any wrong move could be perceived as inappropriate, and additionally, no one likes dealing with naked people. Have you ever been in a fight with a naked person? Getting into an authority war with a 5-year-old that isn't your own kid is much, much worse. The desire to not touch them is increased tenfold, unless of course you have some psychological issues. I yelled inside the bathroom, "Sam, put your trunks on!" any number of times, but his hearing was as selective as my old runaway Dalmatians. "Sam, you're going to be in timeout from swimming if you don't change and get out here now." Nothing. "Sam, don't make me come in there." That time he seemed to hear me. And this kid, I kid you not, turns to me and says, "You can't do that." And for the most part, he's right. I can't do that. And what's more is that I didn't want to do that anyway. All I have to threaten him with is timeout, and if I did go in there wouldn't be much that I could do except for threaten him with timeout in closer proximity. Luckily for me, all the kids finished changing despite being harassed by Sam and his miniature companion. And Sam, poor Sam, was left with no one to show his wiener to, so he changed and went swimming after a very, very long time out. TLDR. Don't get stuck with the young kids as a new camp counselor. Story 26. In high school, I was a counselor at a community outdoor camp, where a lot of the kids who attended were there just because their parents needed to put them somewhere. These kids were typically 8-12 years old. We would have to take the kids on hikes around the property where we'd see a bunch of uninteresting animals, hang out by a pond or creek, then head back to the main center where some animal expert would bring in a snake or owl to give the children some excitement each day. One week we got these two little dudes who hated everything about the camp from the start, but they hated each other more than Samuel Jackson hates snakes on a plane. They were constantly finding creative ways to each other off throughout the week. On the last day of camp, we had just finished a hike and stopped by a creek where everyone could rest and look for frogs or throw mud into the woods. Behind me, I hear one of the two call the other AI, after which I slowly turned around to see what the other one would do. The accused had picked up a half cinder block size rock and was bringing over his head so he could smash the back of the accuser's head in with it. Fortunately, I was close enough to where I could grab the rock before it came down on the other kid's unsuspecting head. TLDR stopped a 12-year-old from smashing another 12-year-old's head in with a rock the size of a 12-year-old's head. Story 27. I worked as a counselor at a camp for adults with disabilities. All my campers were in their 20s, late 30s. One night, one of my campers was masturbating loudly and furiously. Because we all slept in one giant room, her noises were waking everyone up. It was so distracting that I had to give her the masturbation chat the next day and also explain it to all my campers privately. Boy, what a fun day that was. Story 28. Ex-counselor here. Our camp has a thing where one night all the people who had been there for 3 years go out and do crazy in the fields by the camp. Needless to say, I saw a lot of breasts. But other than that and smoking weed, nothing really big happened. Apparently, in years before, some of the abandoned cabins were used during that night for rowdy parties with lots of alcohol involved. This was back in like the 1990s, where I guess the upper staff were a lot more lenient. I worked at the camp in 2010, so I guess I missed the really interesting stuff. It was interesting to bring up the topic to my boss who worked at the camp as a counselor at that time and see him get all red-faced and not know what I was talking about. TLDR. A wild night once a year used to a crazy party, but not we just flash each other and smoke. Story 29. I have been waiting my whole life for this post. So at the beginning of summer camp, many children are shy, anxious, nervous, etc. Other just flat out don't want to be there. One of those people happens to be the phantom shitter. So first week of camp, one of the counselors that I work with was doing a bathroom check, just for overall cleanliness of the site. They found that someone was painting on the bathroom stalls. Disgusting, but not unheard of. Later that week, it happens again. Only this time there is a clear message. Painted in bold on the bathroom wall was, "I want freedom." The phantom shitter doesn't know how to spell, but you get the idea. The situation develops further the following week. Field trip. Rather large playground that has a tall slide structure. When I say tall, this thing is bigger than a house. At the top of it, there is an area where people wait in line to go on these giant slides. As one counselor goes up to watch his children go down said slides, he finds a glorious turd at the top of the slide. Now, the phantom shitter would not have gotten away with taking a at the top of the slide. Way too much traffic up there. My theory, they took the elsewhere in the park and then walked their shit up to the top to be found. Since then, there has been more cave paintings on the bathroom walls but no further turds. We'll post updates if anyone gives a, "This story needs to be heard." I don't care how buried it gets. Story 30. I'm late to this, so this probably won't be seen. Camper, 13, carves giant penis out of. Camper proceeds to run around laughing, holding it on his crotch and such. Counselor laying on a bunk asks to see it. Still lying down, counselor holds wooden penis vertical on crotch. Envy detected. Camper runs up and sits on the wooden while it's being held by the counselor. I put it in the incinerator. Story 31 Day 1. At camp, we jumped out of the bus and ran around because we were so excited. My friend ran behind the bus and the bus ran him over. He was rushed off by ambulance. We didn't see him for another 3 months. Edit spelling. I sound like a 12-yo in those few sentences. I'm 42. Story 32. I worked at an 8-week sleepaway camp in the Northeast and was working in a bunk of 7 and 8-year-olds. As the summer went along, we lost a few counselors due to the fact our campers were the devil's spawn and only 6 or 7 years old, so us remaining counselors were spread thin. And one day in the span of 10 minutes when we didn't have a counselor in the bunk, I'm walking back and all the kids are running out of the bunk screaming about how one of the campers, M6, put his in another kid's mouth. M7. This is an all-boys camp too. And when the camper was later asked why he let the other kid put the his in his mouth, the kid's response was, "Because they dared me to," after long lashings from the director and owners. And what I assume was some long talks with the kids' parents, it was all swept under the rug and forgotten. TLDR, a camper put his in another male camper's mouth. Story 33, was checking rooms after everyone was supposed to have moved out. Found a 12-year-old fucking another 12-year-old male and coming, just as I opened the door. They didn't hear me, so I waited a few minutes, then knocked on the door and opened it to find 2 innocent kids packing their bags. They apologized for being slow to get out of their room. Story 34. Oh man, I have a few stories about this kid with Tourette's that attends the camp I counsel at. This one in particular, we were playing this game called Shuffle Your Butt. The premise is basically musical chairs crossed with Never Have I Ever. So the camper, who I will call Evan, is up to ask the question, and he surveys the room and walks over to this other camper, an Ethiopian girl who flew to Canada to attend the camp, and the only colored camper at this year's 1-2 camp. So Evan says, with the smuggest face I have ever seen, "Shuffle your butt if you're black." The little girl stands up. Evan sits down and everyone looks at the little terror slack-jawed. I was about to burst out laughing, so I had to leave the room briefly, but it was something nobody was expecting. I have a boatload of stories about a camper named Kurt. He has Down syndrome. That kid was solid gold. One year, Kurt was convinced he was Jesus. He wore a purple tablecloth around and made 3 other campers don different colored tablecloths he brought himself and be his disciples. He would often slap female campers' asses as he walked by, one time escalating to him throwing a female counselor against the brick wall of the bathhouse. Another time late in the cabin, we all heard the other counselor stifling back a laugh, and when we noted he pointed to the top bunk, Kurt's bunk, you could see his sleeping bag moving a little quickly near his waist. Kurt was beating his meat, and once we were all alerted to it, he screamed out, "Lightspeed Rescue Rangers!" He then slumped over in his bunk and it was silent. I saw his thumb raise out from the sleeping bag and plop into his mouth. Maybe that's not the hand he used, I thought, but he took his other thumb and put that in his mouth too. He made sure he got those proteins. And my biggest what the Kurt story has to be when I was walking back to the cabin after midnight swim. At this time in particular, I was on my way back from midnight swim approaching the empty dark cabin. I opened the door and turned on the light. Right there standing in the now light-flooded room was Kurt, in nothing but a pair of Walter Whitey underpants and a chocolate mustache courtesy of the candy bar he was sporting. Contraband, I may add. Before I could blink, he charged me and pushed me out the door, slamming it when I was clear, all with a smile and while giggling. Kurt's laugh sounds exactly like a dolphin. Needless to say, I let him have the room for another 5 and went about other business. Edit. Added punctuation, I think. Added a few more stories about Kurt. Story 35. Finally, something I can actually weigh in on. I work at a day camp for kids, ages 4-13. I was with a group of about 10 kids, all 8 or 9 years old. One day before pool time, one kid walked into the bathroom, got buck naked, then started crying because he had lost his bathing suit. I went in trying to defuse the situation and he bolted. He ran around at top speed screaming and crying, flailing his arms all over the place. Do you know how illegal it looks for a 16-year-old boy to chase an 8-year-old? Well, I eventually caught the kid and brought him back to the bathroom. When I asked him what his bathing suit looked like, he pulled a bathing suit out and said, "It looks like this." Oh! Motherfucker had his bathing suit 6 feet from him the entire time.